Welcome to the first annual Concert for Conservation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christopher Lile. I've spent the last 2 years working with nonprofits and research projects focused on protecting wildlife and wild places. These experiences have allowed me to see firsthand the precarious future of many of the species that share our world. Although some of my work has taken me halfway across the world, North Carolinians do not have to look far to discover a critically endangered species of its very own. The red wolf is practically in our backyards, yet many North Carolinians don't even know the species exists. Even I, with my love of wildlife, did not know much about this species until Christian Hunt, our guest speaker today, came to my ecology class in college to share the story of the red wolf. Since then, I've done my best to advocate for the species whenever I can, but the red wolf was in dire straits when I first heard this story, and since then, their situation has become even more uncertain. As a millennial, born into a world and generation that has become desensitized to the word extinction, it is easy to feel hopeless when faced with extinction after extinction. It seems like an easier option to just ignore the problems facing our natural world, especially if they don't seem to affect us. But extinctions affect us all. They affect our ecosystems, our culture, our art, and our music. We simply can't afford to tune out to the extinction crisis. The plight of the red wolf sparked an idea in me, a concert for conservation, to combine my passion for music with my desire to elevate the topic of species conservation within this church and the community. And the red wolf seemed like a perfect focus for this first event. This idea quickly became a reality thanks to many people. I am so excited that Christian Hunt from Defenders of Wildlife readily agreed to share the story of the red wolf. I am very thankful for the entire church staff who have encouraged and promoted this event from the very beginning. And I am extremely appreciative of all the musicians that graciously agreed to donate their time and talents to this event. And I am proud to be part of a church so open to promoting ideas like species conservation that are so rarely discussed in a church setting. And right now, we have a chance to lead other churches and our community in the right direction on this issue, not just with red wolves, but all wildlife and wild places that are facing extinction or destruction. I hope this concert will inspire all of you to take action on behalf of this species. The red wolf has as much of a right to live in North Carolina as any of us, but it has an uphill battle for its very existence. For reasons that Christian will explain later, North Carolina has lost nearly 100 wolves in the last 4 years. They represented nearly a third of the total population, including those in captivity, of red wolves left in existence. Later today, there will be an opportunity to monetarily support the remaining red wolves. And just as a reminder, if you haven't checked the back of your program, if you wish to write a check, please address it to First United Methodist Church with red wolves in the memo line. Before the concert begins, we're going to take 1 minute to honor the 100 wolves that were lost in the last 4 years by listening in silence to their voices. Please don't let the last howls of the red wolf go unnoticed. We as North Carolinians can and must do better by this species. Thank you.
This concert will proceed without very many words, but but we did want you to know something about the flauto traverso that Anna is playing today. The piece, oh, I'm sorry. I was told not to do that, and I got it too close. Traverso flute is the flute for which Bach and Handel composed, so it could also be called the Baroque flute. The piece that Anna is playing is based on a Hopi Indian flute prelude.
The great humorist Tom Lehrer has been a close friend of mine for about 15 years. I've sung many of his songs, never the one I'm about to attempt. And I thought I would just say as a preface to this, I want to dedicate this song to the many brave women and men who attempted to teach me chemistry.
I Wow. I am so impressed. I guess I should start with an introduction first and foremost. My name's Christian Hunt. I work for Defenders of Wildlife. But before going into anything Red Wolf related, I just want to give everyone here a huge thank you. All the musicians who have came out, Kathy McNeil, Christopher Lile for organizing this. You know, I do a lot of events, so I know just how incredibly complicated and complex it is to pull off something like this. So if we could, I'd like to give them a round of applause on behalf of the Defenders. So thank you for all having me today. I work for Defenders. We are a national conservation organization, if you guys aren't aware. And our MO is essentially pulling endangered species back from the edge of the extinction cliff. Here in the Southeast, our regional office is over in Asheville, so it's just down the road. But we work on all sorts of species, and of course, one of our focal species is the red wolf. But you know, this is particularly really exciting and invigorating for me because I've delivered a lot of presentations over the years, and this is actually my first at a church. And it's kind of a homecoming in a way because I actually went to Catholic school for many years when I was younger. And you know, just as a little background, I have been enamored with wildlife for as long as I can remember. When I was in Catholic school, you know, I vividly recall dressing up as Noah in kindergarten, and I just thought I was the coolest thing to hit the block, because, you know, in my mind, the story of Noah I thought was fascinating, and I still think it's fascinating now because, you know, it fundamentally speaks to what I think is a moral truth, and that truth is that it's fundamentally right, you know, to protect and to speak for non-human life, to speak for wildlife. And I believe it's fundamentally wrong to do otherwise. And, you know, whether you take that story or not, I think it is profound. And, you know, as I grew up, I grew out of a lot of things, but my love for wildlife has stuck. And today, my full-time job, if you will, doesn't feel like a job because I love it, but it is essentially staunching the wounds we've inflicted upon this earth. And, you know, they are massive wounds, unfortunately. The truth is sobering. History is sobering. We are in the midst of what scientists are calling the world's 6th mass extinction event. And that simply means we're killing off wildlife at a pace that has not been seen in eons. There have been 5 mass extinction events in the history of this earth. And we're now destroying wildlife at a pace that rivals those events. And it's important to remember those events concluded with the veritable disappearance of all this planet's wildlife. And you know, the extinction crisis has hit America particularly hard. In the past few centuries, we've lost about 500 species, many of which have been concentrated right here in southern Appalachia. In North Carolina alone, we've lost the eastern cougar, the eastern elk, the ivory-billed woodpecker, the passenger pigeon, the Carolina parakeet. The list goes on and on and on. And it's very sad and it's very disturbing. But, you know, I'm here today to talk about one species that is on that edge right now. It is wobbling on the edge of that extinction cliff. And that is, of course, the red wolf. And, you know, I'm glad Christopher let you guys listen to the howls of red wolves. I think it's just majestic and inspiring. But what most people don't realize is that not too long ago, that is the sound you would have heard right here in Waynesville. You know, in a couple hours, you would have heard red wolves echoing throughout the forest. And that sound would have emanated throughout the entire Southeast. You know, this animal lived in the swamps of Florida. It lived on the plains of Texas. It lived in the deciduous forests of the Ohio River Valley and just everywhere in between. So it was also called the Florida wolf, the Mississippi Valley wolf. It went by a lot of different monikers. But, you know, red wolves they're fairly conspicuous in the sense that they're loud, right? I mean, you know, when they're around, you're going to hear them. And unfortunately, when European settlers came to these shores, they brought old world attitudes with them, right? namely a vehement hatred for anything with pointy teeth, principally wolves. And they set out to extinguish the red wolf from the southeast. And for about 400 years, settlers dynamited, they poisoned, they shot, they tortured, and they burned alive red wolves on a scale that is truly incomprehensible today. Hundreds of thousands of animals were killed. And by the time, the conservation ethic rolled around, this was a ghost. This animal virtually did not exist. By 1973, when the Endangered Species Act was legislated, biologists were only able to locate 17 red wolves left in the entire southeast, and they were in Louisiana and the Texas country, essentially hiding. They were in wetlands, they were in very inhospitable terrain. But we were very lucky at that time because we did find them, we did save them, we brought them into captivity, and today there's a couple hundred red wolves in captivity, but the goal has always been for us and for everyone to establish wild populations again, right? What is a wolf if not wild? And red wolves were reintroduced into eastern North Carolina in 1987, and in less than 20 years, we went from 0 to over 150 animals. So that may not sound like a lot, but for wolves and carnivores and wide-roaming animals, that's a significant success. And at that time, we were very hopeful. We were very hopeful that the red wolf would come to reoccupy a large part of its historical range. Unfortunately, things have changed. For you guys who have followed this issue, we are now at a very dire place. There are realistically about 30 red wolves left in the wild in North Carolina, and that's the entire southeast, 30 animals. That's the entirety of the global wild population of this species. So again, it is on the edge. It's facing several challenges, but I would assume that the challenge that is most pressing is the one that would not immediately come to mind, and that is pressure from our very own state government. Wolves are politically fraught animals, is the simple, unfortunate truth. And in 2015, the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, which is our state wildlife agency, demanded that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the agency actually managing red wolves, terminate the red wolf program in North Carolina, declare the species extinct in the wild, and they essentially told the federal government to pack their bags and that the red wolf is not welcome here in our state. And due to that pressure, we've seen the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service essentially abandon the red wolf recovery effort over the years. As Christopher mentioned, the agency has terminated essential management tools. They've turned a blind eye to poaching. Red wolves are being shot frequently. They've let go of key staff, and they've allowed landowners to arbitrarily shoot non-threatening wolves. And as a result of that, the population has tanked. We've lost about 75 to 100 red wolves in the last 5 years or so. And the species, it's struggling right now. We really don't know the exact number, but as I mentioned, we're at about 30 to 40 animals. And my organization right now is fighting for the survival of the program. Last year, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, again, bowing to pressure from our state, essentially proposed gutting the recovery effort altogether. They said that they plan to shrink the red wolf recovery area, which is where the red wolves live, by about 90%, and then allow all private landowners to shoot any red wolf that comes onto their property. So again, the red wolf recovery effort is at a really critical juncture right now, where it's either going to live or it's going to die within the next year or so. So that is the principal challenge facing the species. They are facing some other issues. If you guys have followed this, there has been some debate about genetics, what exactly this animal is genetically speaking. But I'm happy to tell you that was resolved last week once and for all. We now know that the red wolf as has been believed for decades now, is its own distinct species worthy of protection. And that's really important because we need to bring this animal back here. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with ecology and trophic cascades and all that, but to put it simply, our forests are not in a healthy state right now. When you go outside and you look at them, they look vibrant, they look green, they look like they're doing well, but in many cases, they are chronically overbrowsed by prey animals, such as white-tailed deer. Historically, red wolves were everywhere, right? And they controlled deer populations. But unfortunately, what we're seeing today is that these animals have exploded in number, and they, of course, love young trees, they love saplings, and we're seeing that in many areas throughout the Southeast, there is simply no forest regeneration anymore. We see a lot of old trees, but in many places, we don't have any young trees growing anymore because there are no red wolves, and there are too many deer left. And that, of course, means that, when older trees die, there are no younger trees to take their place. So it's interesting, you can very much tie the health of our southeastern forests to the presence of red wolves and cougars and large carnivores. And if we're gonna get them back, we have to keep the Red Wolf program alive. The Red Wolf Recovery Plan calls for red wolves to be reintroduced in 3 sites throughout the Southeast. So presumably, we could potentially get red wolves back here in eastern and western North Carolina someday. But in order to do that, we have to speak up now. We have to save what we have in eastern North Carolina. We have to show the world that this program was and can be a success again before starting over elsewhere. And I really cannot stress enough that begins with you all. We've been litigating over this issue a long time. We've been working with elected officials, the agencies, but it comes down to North Carolinian voices right now. And, with everyone in the room today, if half of you took action and contacted the people that need to hear from you, we could really make a significant splash. So if you guys are interested, I'd really encourage you to check out the materials back there and on your program. Christopher has offered some talking points and things you can do to help us. And again, I would really much appreciate your help because what is now the world's most endangered canine, the red wolf, needs your support. So thank you very much. If you guys are interested in donating, as Christopher mentioned, Defenders would be immensely grateful. We are an entirely member and donor-funded nonprofit, and I can assure you that all the monies that you donate will go to this recovery effort in eastern North Carolina on the ground. So thank you so much.
for coming for this most worthwhile cause. And an extra special thank you to all these musicians. When I realized I was going to have to make phone calls and ask people to play for nothing, I thought, you know, I'm not sure I'm up for this. And every single one of them said, let me look at my calendar, and within 2 seconds, yes, happy to do it. I am deeply touched by my colleagues' most professional response to this, and I thank each and every one of you for that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you also to our office staff, who has done so much to prepare for this with all of the posters that they created, the beautiful postcards. They have just been behind this 100%. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.